Welcome to the first episode of Beginning Linux, where I basically Linux, or at least get a basic understanding of it. In this first episode, we will be doing a video on what is Linux. Anyways, let's get into it. Alright, so what is Linux? Well, Linux is not an operating system. That is a common misconception. Linux is actually a kernel for an operating system. Without a kernel, if you moved your mouse, nothing would happen, because the hardware isn't telling the software what to do with the mouse when you move it. Or let's say you open some music on your computer. Well, the kernel, through Pulse Audio, is what tells the speaker to make sound. Every operating system has a kernel. Windows 10 through XP in 2000 all use the Windows NT kernel, and Mac OS, iOS, tvOS, all of that use the XNU kernel, also known as Darwin. Now, what kind of operating systems use the Linux kernel? So, a lot of popular operating systems use the Linux kernel, such as Android, which is the most widely used mobile OS, and as well as desktop operating systems such as Chrome OS, and yeah. Those are the two most common Linux-based operating systems, Chrome OS and Android. But there are several other ones, such as Debian, Ubuntu, which is based on Debian, Linux Mint, which is based on Ubuntu, Peppermint OS. I'm gonna stop naming Debian derivatives. There's Fedora Linux, OpenSUSE, Arch Linux, Gentoo, Linux from scratch if you're a maniac. There's tons of different operating systems based on the Linux kernel. Now, Linux is commonly used because it's free, it's open source, it has good documentation, and that is why pretty much every open source operating system, with some exceptions like some of the BSDs, that's why most of them use the Linux kernel over something like the BSD kernel or, God forbid, GNU Hurd. Now, Linux is just the kernel. There are other components of a Linux operating system too, such as the bootloader, such as Grub, which allows your system to boot into Linux. There's also the graphical server, so that's usually Xorg or Wayland, and that is what displays everything on your monitor. And there's the desktop environment, which displays, it's basically how you interact with the operating system. It's the UI, and we'll get into those later. So yeah, for the most part, that's what Linux is. It's pretty cool because it's open source, so anybody can use the kernel, they can redistribute it and make modifications to it. Anybody can contribute code to it. It's really cool. And that's why Linux is one of the best kernels you can use right now. Anyways, thank you for watching this first episode. Hopefully this series will help some people out, and yeah.